Okay, so this is the 1975 Datsun 280Z, and it doesn't look like a 280Z because it has a 240 bumper in the front and a 260 bumper in the back. The reason why for that is because the bumpers weigh about 80 pounds a piece for the stock bumpers. NZ9s. Exhaust in the back is a 3.5 inch Dynamax muffler, 3.5 inch all the way back off the turbo. Centerline wheels. The brakes in the front are 4-piston calipers. Application is a 1984 Toyota 4-wheel drive front caliper. They bolt right onto the spindle. The interior is basically stock. Factory door panels, carpets, headliner. The roll bar is certified, roll cage certified to 850s. And you notice right here is a stock seat here. The other seat is a racing seat because the head clearance for the helmet and also the seat belt crotch had to be in there. Notice the standard factory issued shift handle. Everything is factory as far as the console, dashboard, steering column. On the side here we have a MSD ignition box, Innovate wideband, and then also a temperature probe for the turbo to see how hot it's running for the exhaust side, and then also a converter to run your laptop for recording or tuning purposes. Notice the 140 mile/hour speed on the side there. That was something that was accomplished way back when. And that would be the 1/4 mile. The engine is basically a 350 block from a 77 Corvette, and it has a Callie's crank with Howard rods. It's their ultimate duty rod that's in there. AFR heads that have been ported. Excel DIF injection system with their intake manifold, fuel rails. It has a sequential fuel injected distributor to make the injector sequential MSD ignition. Of course, the Optima battery in the factory spot. The upper intake right here was a special made that I did myself, fabricated that, and put a baffle inside of it and flow tested it with a shop vac to make sure that all the runners had equal air blowing out of them. And that was a bench test on it, and it works pretty good. Did that to clear the hood so the hood would close completely. The turbocharger is a GT42. It's a 69.8 millimeter turbo. It's a smaller one of the GT42 series. It's rated at 850 horsepower. We've had up to 780 horse to the rear tires on a dyno and 900 pounds of torque. The intercooler is one that's a precision turbo core. It is 3.5 inches thick, 24 inches long, and 12 inches wide. It has a 4-inch pipe coming from the intercooler to the inlet of the throttle body, and a 3-inch pipe from the turbo outlet down below. You can see that down there. And then it comes up the top there. That's a 3-inch pipe into the intercooler. And the reason why I did that is because a smaller pipe from the turbo to the intercooler really helps out on eliminating some turbo lag because you're not filling all that empty space up. And having a bigger tube coming out of the intercooler keeps the air charge down because you're not squeezing it back down to a small area again. The valve covers, Scarab. This was originally a Scarab car. We found this car on a car lot in California back in 1985 with a 327 Big Journal crank in it, and a set of angle plug heads that were, I believe, over-the-counter Chevy aftermarket heads that were ported and polished from crane cams years ago. And so since then we've done a lot of modifications to this car. The engine's long gone, and but it originally came with a Super T10 4-speed, and the rear end was a 3.36 rear end ratio rear end gear, and with a Hurst shifter in it. You can see the details right here on the linkage for the kick-down cable for the transmission. The transmission is 700 R4, 1988, using stock planetaries, stock input shaft, had a Super Sun shell put in it and a few other modifications. I myself tuned the transmission and weighted the governor and modified that so the shift points are at 6,500 RPMs from first to second, and the same for second to third gear. Wastegates down below are tile 38mm, have two, one on each side. These headers are Sanderson shorty headers, and with 2.5-inch pipes join into one 3-inch pipe to the bottom of the turbo. And what's good about this block here, the oil feeds right off the front of the block, and the cooling system is very, very simple. It is an S10 type radiator, very thin plastic tanks. Radiator works just fine, cools just fine. Have a CSI water pump. The CSI water pump is been modified to be off to the side so the turbo would fit on it. So I just basically made some, I cut the ends off, threaded them, and put brass fittings on there with hoses up to the water pump, so that way we had room for the turbo. Okay, and one last thing we did to it is put an AEM methanol water injection on it. And what's good about that is you can get away with more boost and more timing. And right now the timing's at 29 degrees, and it runs very, very cool, no detonation, and on 91 Chevron pump gas. The reservoir's right here, right in the spot where you would put your, where the windshield washer fluid tank would go. It's pretty big. That's how big that is right there. You fill that up before you go to the race. You can usually make about 10 runs before you have to put any fluid in it. The transmission also has a blanket around it, a TCI flywheel shield, SFI approved, and also an SFI harmonic balancer and flywheel. Let's see, rear end.
Boost controller.
Rear end is stock with some modifications. We use 1984 280ZX turbo axles with adapters. The rear end is a 3.36 gear ratio 200mm rear end, R200. And it also has a Nismo limited slip differential in it with 4 spiders in it and 6 clutches. The breakaway slippage on is about 75 pounds. I set it tight. The gas tank has been modified. We put a big inlet at the back there. We thought it needed that for the fuel pump. Still factory tank. Use the Aeromotive fuel pump. And also we rubber mounted it so that way it doesn't make a lot of noise. We used rubber straps and hung it by rubber straps, and it's very, very quiet. The rear struts have been modified. If I can see that or not. You can see how far they've been, the purchase has been cut off and raised about 2.5 inches with stiffer springs so we can put a wider tire on it on the inset. See a good shot all the way down there. Fuel filter, transmission. Inside the car, I got factory gauges. The tack works, factory tack. AEM boost controller, factory voltmeter, fuel, and temperature and oil. And the car at one time had an AC, but we took that out. And you can see where the shifter is. Parking brake. And then underneath here is where we got all the wiring. I don't know if you can see all that. Relays. Quite a bit. But it works pretty good though. Okay, I'm going to start it now. Oh yeah, I forgot to tighten the battery up. There we go. So this how it starts when it's cold. Like any normal fuel injected car. Forgot to mention it has a comp cam roller cam in it with roller tip rockers. Because of the problem with the Datsun at 100 miles an hour, it starts lifting the front end up, so we turn that down and it holds the front end down at higher speeds.